All right, welcome everyone. My name is Lei. I am Lei, the CVA, the Community Volunteer Ambassador for the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. I will go ahead and start off by doing our general consent statement. So as a visible disclosure, we'd like to inform any participants that any and all the Zoom series is and will be recorded. The purpose of this is to provide the Zoom series to those who participated or missed out on the session. It is also provided the information for participants to refer back to. In addition to the visible disclosure, this statement will be orally stated at the beginning of each Zoom series, like I am right now. I'm going to stop sharing and hand it off to Ranger Bonnie.
Thank you so much, Lei. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Perfect. And either Sarah or Lei, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And so in our 30-minute program, participants are going to be muted. Throughout the PowerPoint, there are going to be chat questions where you can enter your response into the chat box. And there will also be time saved at the end for any questions that you might have. My name is Bonnie Smith. I am a park guide. I have been with the National Park Service for the past 4 years, and I've worked at Yellowstone, Sequoia, and I also worked in education over at Santa Monica Mountains last year, and I currently work as a park guide over at Channel Islands National Park. And I'm really excited to talk with you more about the different ways that we can help support English language learners. English language learners are one of the fastest growing student populations here in America. In fall of 2000, there were 3.8 million English language learners. And then in fall 2018, there were 5 million English language learners. So you can see just how much this population is continuing to expand. And so we're going to talk about the challenges that they face and also strategies that we can use both in the classroom and also in our national parks. And so our first chat question, in the chat box, please feel free to share what are some of the roles and skills that you have as a volunteer in parks?
So we've got somebody, we've got some answers coming in, helping with education, introducing people to nature, educational docent, I volunteer in education working with 4th and 5th graders, providing info at special events, making students feel welcome in their parks, and introduce people to the park are some of the answers so far.
Fantastic. And to add on, even thinking about our volunteers here at our visitor center at Channel Islands National Park, thinking about the skills that they have, I see our volunteers who are great at multitasking, they're communicators, they're problem solvers, and a very important role that volunteers also have is that of educator. And so earlier, yesterday, you all were sent out a 3-minute video, and I hope you got the chance to watch it. And the video focuses on a young boy. His name is Moises, and he is in math class. And it highlights the challenges that he is encountering in an English-speaking classroom, with Spanish being his native language. And he is still developing his English skills. And so after having watched that clip, what is your reaction after having seen that short clip?
Sorry. For those who can't see chat, there was a feeling, overall feeling of sadness, a feeling of pain, that there was inequity or unfair. Also, and this is a good point, that he's a very bright kid.
Yeah, so those feelings, some people felt after viewing that film, sadness, maybe seeing the isolation that Moises was experiencing, and definitely acknowledging that Moises, that he values education, that it's important to him. He's advocating for himself, even when the teacher says that, no, you don't need to take the test, Moises. It's okay. Moises is still standing up for himself, telling the teacher, no, it is important. I do need to take this test.
Bonnie, a couple of people also said that addressing problems that teachers have and teachers unable to handle certain issues.
Definitely. So there might be some teachers who might not have the preparation necessary to best support students like Moises. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that later on. And so with our second chat question, think about a time when you did not speak the native language of an area. How did you feel?
So lost, awkward, isolated, and intimidated, frustrated, helpless, anxious, uneasy, isolated, in need of an interpreter, isolated, frustrated, they felt stupid. Even when I am in Mexico trying to get by the day, I felt exhausted at the end. Yeah. Clueless, defenseless.
Yeah, definitely. And these are all very valid feelings. These might have been feelings that maybe you've experienced while traveling. I've had that, you know, going into a different country, not knowing the language, that sense of confusion. These are feelings that maybe Moises might have felt. These might also be feelings that other students who are learning English might feel as well. And so it's really important to acknowledge that we are all learners of language from the time we are young, when we're learning our native tongue, to maybe the languages that we're learning in high school or college, and even the language of our workplace. Maybe you work in a profession where there's certain terms or vocabulary that might be familiar to you, but unfamiliar to others. And so we all can make a difference in supporting students as they develop skills in English. For myself, I have worked with the Park Service, but I also have a background in education. I went to Cal State Los Angeles for my teaching credential, and part of our teacher preparation was getting instruction in how we can better support English language learners. And I also tutored English language learners at a high school over in Baldwin Park. And going back even further, my grandmother, Ophelia, she was an English as a second language teacher. She taught at Breed Street Elementary over in Boyle Heights in Los Angeles. And she also tutored English language learners at the YMCA, as well as adults, in helping them develop their English speaking skills. And so just like my grandma, I'm really excited to share what I know about this area. I'm not an expert in it, but there's always room to grow, to learn, and to reach out and help others. So for our next chat question, in the classroom or in national parks, what are some of the various languages you hear students speaking?
There's Spanish seems to be predominant, Mandarin, some German, Russian, and French. Japanese, French, German, Arabic, Hebrew. Spanish seems to be the primary, but a lot of French and German, along with Korean, Mandarin, Japanese, Hebrew, so a variety of languages.
Thank you for sharing. And so we see that students are speaking a variety of different languages. And with English language learners, ELLs, they are a very diverse group of students, very diverse in their country of origin. Some may or may not be refugees. They're diverse in their socioeconomic status, as well as age and religion and other factors. And so ELLs are kindergarten through 12th grade students who have a primary language other than English. And ELLs have not yet developed proficiency in speaking, writing, reading, and listening skills in English, the skills that are necessary to succeed in the regular classroom. And so it's important to differentiate social language versus academic language. For a student who might be new to the country, entering the public school system for the first time here in America, it might take them 1 to 2 years to develop social language, which is the language of the playground, the language of the cafeteria, whereas it could take much longer to develop academic language, which is the language of the textbooks that they would read in English. Academic language could take about 5 to 7 years to develop at the most advanced level. So social language might be on the playground. I'm going down the slide first, whereas academic language would be the language of more higher academic concepts like learning about the water cycle, terms in English such as evaporation and condensation and precipitation. It is important to recognize that ELLs, they bring a wealth of knowledge and skills to not only to the classroom, but to society as well. It's important to recognize that these students can teach us so much, and through their cultures and experiences, they make the classroom, they make our society a much better place. ELLs, they also encounter challenges to their academic achievement. That could include maybe having to move often, which might be the case for students coming from families that are migrant farm workers. Other challenges might be gaps in their schooling, as well as maybe having teachers who aren't well prepared to best support these students. Another trauma might be, another challenge might be trauma that they might have experienced through their migration to America. But there are ways that we all can help support students who are English language learners. That includes school administrators, that includes teachers, parents, and us as volunteers and park staff. So now I'm going to be sharing more demographics looking at ELLs on a national, state, and local level. About 1 in 10 students in America are English language learners in the public school system. And majority of them are native born. We can see here looking at this graph that for elementary school students, pre-K through 5th, that about 85% of ELLs were born here in America. Looking at the nation, we'll see that in the dark blue, that these are states that have large populations of ELL students, in particular states like Florida, Texas, as well as California, with California having the largest population of ELLs in the nation. ELLs, a lot of them are in urban areas, but we're also seeing a lot of ELL students living in rural and suburban areas as well. All 50 states and territories of America have ELL students. And so now looking closer at California, about 19.3% of California public school students are classified as ELLs. And for the 2018-2019 school year, here in California, that was about 1.196 million students. The majority of these English language learners here in California are in elementary school. So thinking about the students that we serve, both here at Channel Islands, we have a lot of 4th graders that come to the visitor center, and also thinking about the students that SAMO is serving as well. It's really important to recognize that a lot of ELLs are younger. Each state has its own way of assessing incoming students to see if they will be designated as English language learners. Here in the state of California, our assessment is the English Language Proficiency Assessments for California, also known as LPAC. And when students first enter the public school system, they will take this test to see if they will be identified as English language learners. And they will be placed as either novice to intermediate or to being more fluent. And then every year following that, they will take a yearly assessment to gauge their progress. And so from a level 1 to 4, 1 being at the beginning stage, whereas level 4 is more well-developed English skills. This will help the schools to see which language services are to be given to that student, and it also helps the student's parents or guardians to be aware of the progress that their child is making. Here in California, English language learner data is collected for 67 languages. And here are the top 10 languages spoken by students in our public school system here in California. And you can see that Spanish is predominant at 81%, followed by Vietnamese, Mandarin, Arabic, and so on. Looking specifically at LAUSD, about 20.6% of students within LAUSD are English language learners. And that accounts for about 123,000 students who are classified as ELLs. And you can see just how large the LAUSD district is, going from up north in the San Fernando Valley all the way down south to the Long Beach area. And so reflecting on, you know, especially for our peers over at SAMO, you might serve a lot of students from the LAUSD area. And then looking here at Ventura County, where here at Channel Islands, this is one of the main populations of students that we serve are from this district, going from Fillmore all the way down to Oxnard, into Ventura, and even out towards Simi Valley. In Ventura County, about 1 in 5 Ventura County students are English language learners, about 140,000 students. Excuse me, about 140,000 students are in the K through 12 system here in Ventura County. Of that 140,000, about 1 in 5 are ELLs. Earlier, we talked about some of the challenges that English language learners face. Of those, only about 63% of ELLs graduate high school, compared to 82% for the nation. And of that 63% of ELLs who do graduate high school, only 1.4% take college exams like the ACT and the SAT. And so we've gone to learn more about ELLs, their demographics on the national, state and local level, and some of the challenges that they face, as well as the great knowledge and skills that they bring to the classroom, the strengths that they have. And so now we're going to talk more about strategies that we can use both in the classroom and out on trail or in the visitor center that we can use to help support these students. These are strategies that are great to use with all students in general, but especially for English language learners. And so the first strategy is to speak slower, not louder. So you want to speak slower, but not to the point where it sounds unnatural. You don't want to be shouting at a student or anyone. You want to have a voice level that is understandable. I do know that when I do have a large group of students, I do like to check to make sure that all students are able to hear me, like towards the back of the group, towards the back of the room. So it is important to check to see that they can hear you, but you just want to remember to not be shouting at your students. Another strategy is to provide short instructions that are clear and concise. Also, writing key vocabulary on or directions on the board That could be the whiteboard in the classroom. That could be even a whiteboard that you might take on trail with you with the dry erase marker. So you can write the vocabulary for your students to see. Even here at Channel Islands National Park at our visitor center, near the touch table, there is a whiteboard. Often I will use that whiteboard to write down vocabulary to help a student who might need extra assistance spelling something out. Also really important is the use of visuals and objects. That could include things that students can touch, things that they can feel, having photos that you can show students. Here at our visitor center, we have a touch table with seashells and whale baleen, different items that they can explore. And even using objects when you're out on trail is great to have as well. Reflecting on the national parks, it's important for us as staff and volunteers to be aware of what resources are available, not only for the general public, but also for our students and for ELLs in particular. Here we see an exhibit from Everglades National Park. It's bilingual in both Spanish and English. So just being aware of what resources your park has available, resources that are in different languages, whether it's brochures, junior ranger books, maybe videos. If you know, your videos have closed captioning, very important to be aware of that. And also resources that might be available online for them as well in different languages. And even pamphlets such as for being used on trail, like hiking guides. So our next question, if you can please share if you speak, do you speak another language? If yes, what language or languages?
So Spanish, American Sign Language, Farsi. Lay, is that Tagalog?
It's close enough. Yeah, I know it's like the Girl Scout cookies type of vibe. Tagalog.
Tagalog, thank you. Jamaican. Tori, can you define that? Is that a special?
You're mute.
Oh, it's called it's patois.
Patois.
Jamaican patois.
Is that a dialect of?
There's an argument about that, but they would say a language.
Okay. French.
Thank you for sharing. And we can see the wealth of languages spoken amongst each other. And it's really important to see that as an asset. Maybe you encounter a student who speaks a language that you might be unfamiliar with, but maybe there's another volunteer or another park staff member who speaks the language of that student. And it's really important that we acknowledge the variety of languages that we all speak, and also acknowledging the variety of languages that our students speak. Some might be bilingual. They might even be able to speak more than 2 languages. And so here we see a photo of a park ranger on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., giving a presentation in Spanish. And so making these parks more accessible to people. Other strategies include creating a safe space free of judgment. We want to encourage students to take risks and to know that, well, we all need to know that mistakes are part of the learning process. It's also important to promote interaction with others. That could include sharing with a buddy or having a larger group discussion. And then also checking for student understanding is important. And also giving a pause after you might ask a question. This gives students time to process what you're asking and for them to be able to think of a response that they might want to share. And also providing opportunities for speaking, writing, reading, and listening throughout the day, throughout the time that they're at the national park, also known as SWRL. So make sure you swirl throughout practicing your speaking, writing, reading, and listening, and giving the students opportunities to develop those skills in English. The most important thing that we can do as educators is to provide encouragement to ELLs as they develop their English skills, to encourage them and to show them that we care. This quote says that teachers need to give encouragement and praise for what ELLs can do instead of dwelling on all that they can't yet do by providing frequent opportunities for their success. So one strategy that I haven't seen in a textbook, but I think it's really important, is to smile and to show these kids that we care and that we are there for them and that we want for them to have the best experience in our national parks, out on trail, out in nature, to smile and reassure them that this is a place where they can grow and feel comfortable. We can help students like Rosenda and her sisters feel that they are part of our national parks and that these parks belong to them. Here we see Rosenda. She's reading to her younger sisters. They live in Fresno, and their parents are originally from Mexico, and the girls, they speak Mixteco, which is the indigenous language of their parents. So here are some additional resources available to you. These are some resources that I used in making this PowerPoint. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time and dedication and volunteering in parks. Thank you for the work that you do in making national parks a more inclusive and accessible place for all. Thank you for listening to my PowerPoint, but more importantly, thank you for listening to all students, especially English language learners, and making them feel welcomed. And so we'll now go ahead, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. This is also my contact information where you can reach out to me if you have any feedback or want to continue the discussion or have any other resources that you would like to share. And I also included here a link for a TED Talk that I would want to encourage everyone to check out. It's by Shantae Park, and it's about her own personal experiences as being a second language learner. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I think this is an important subject because I have a problem with hearing. And so before that occurred, I wasn't really fully aware of the challenge some people have. So a similar situation here with language difficulties. It's easy to not fully appreciate the challenge that people have when they have a language difficulty in a new situation. So this opens for me a little better understanding of how to deal with the public who have a language issue.
Definitely, and even thinking about our visitors that come to national parks, with there being an increase in international visitors, just having that awareness is really important, and kind of reflecting on how we can better help. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, because it's really fun to help people, whatever their challenge is, you know, disabilities of any kind or language, hearing. It's really a lot of fun to help them, you know, be aware of what's available to them. And it's just fun for all.
Definitely, we can all learn from each other.
Hey, Bonnie.
Oh,
I just wanted to say, you know, it was really cool that you're talking about this, because I definitely related a lot to this whole thing. I mean, I was like essentially part of this like group demographic of being an LAUSD kid my whole life. You know, my parents were immigrants. My parents had this very strict rule, which I'm sort of thankful now, that it was like strictly Spanish at home only, and their ideology was like, okay, you're gonna learn English in school, so don't speak English at home. Even though they did speak a little English, but their main thing was like, you're gonna speak Spanish at home, which now is helpful. But as a kid, I think because my parents were like sort of nailing this in my head that, oh, you need to speak Spanish at home, you speak English at school. I think I was then sort of ashamed to speak Spanish for a while as a kid, or not ashamed, but sort of embarrassed. Like I didn't want to do it because it was something my parents wanted me to do. But then it sort of made it difficult. And I like how you talk about like playground language and social like language versus academic language. Because now that I'm older, I feel like I didn't learn a lot of the academic language in Spanish, and it's very different, right? I mean, think about the conversations you have with grandma at the dinner table in Spanish versus like, you know, now being an interpreter talking about like fire ecology in Spanish. You know, it's like a whole nother, like I have to go back and try to relearn so much of this. So it's interesting, you know, everyone grows up a little differently, but I totally like, I mean, everything you talked about was like spot on, like, you know, how you were raised. You know, even though I was born here in Los Angeles, I still had to deal with certain things like learning English at school was a little bit of a challenge, even though, you know, it's hard to remember a lot of it now.
And I want to just quickly chime in and pretty much piggybacking off of Luis there, you know, both of us growing up in LAUSD. And I mean, I'm very fortunate that I've kind of seen both sides of working at Channel Islands and working with youth from Ventura County. And I mean, as well as in Samo, we do encounter a lot of youth in our ed programming and so forth. And I think one of those things, right? And even then, sometimes I will not have bias, but if not, I will get caught off guard, especially when I'm translating things into Spanish for myself. I'm not a full-on fluent speaker, but similar to Luis, I spoke primarily in Spanish with my parents and pretty much just consumed everything around my surrounding and my environment from school and so forth, and through media. But what I was trying to get to is the different forms of Spanish, right? Or at least kind of like these, definitely someone that is a native Spanish speaker, or, you know, L youth, especially with LAUSD, right? You might encounter folks that are coming from El Salvador or Guatemala and those from Mexico. And so there's very different things. And even though a word may be kind of across the board, may mean something, there are others that might have dual meanings or so forth. And it's a very huge component that you also bring this up, Bonnie, as far as working with youth from Ventura County are those indigenous languages of Mixteco or Zapotec, because it is a very real thing and two different audiences, right? And so that's just been my personal experience working on both ends, or at least in Ventura County and as well as LA County. So thank you again, Bonnie, for bringing up these very relevant topics, or at least this talk in general. I appreciate it.
Hey, Adelaide, did you want to ask her your question that you put in the chat? I thought it was a good one.
Oh yeah, what did I write? I just wrote that. Can you share, Bonnie, if you have a couple minutes to share kind of like a recent or memorable experience in regards to working with ELL youth at all? Anything like an experience that just kind of pops up? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So when I was tutoring over in Baldwin Park, I got to tutor 2 young women, both high school students, and we were preparing for one of the state exams, and one of the girls, she wrote a letter to me, and she wrote like kind of like how like she saw me like as a hero to her, and that really touched my heart, because I could see how dedicated she was to her education and to learning and wanting to prepare for the exam. And that letter I still have, and I wonder about her now, and I wonder, you know, how she's doing. And for me, it was just such a really special experience getting able to spend time one-on-one with her and to see the development of her skills in English, but more importantly, to get to know her as a person. And so it's moments like that where I feel like this is really an important area to talk about, so we can better support our students.
And real quickly, I don't want to take too much time from everybody, but just again, going off those lived experiences, when I was in El Paso out in Texas, I had this opportunity to work with some of the youth, the migrant youth that were working or that were under the care of a nonprofit out there, many coming from Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and ranging in ages. And we had a facilitated dialogue, and there was aspects about their understanding of nature and the environment, right? And I believe you had mentioned in one of your slides about what we can also learn from, and what even from the youngest individual to an older individual coming from a different country or different background, you know, what do they bring to the table if and when they're ready to talk. And I was really blown away that even though as we were kind of going through explanations and kind of a Western understanding of nature, a lot of the youth brought in that experience of just kind of that organic knowledge of, let's say, pollution does this and this and that to the environment, or if we accumulate too much trash, what effects that have on the environment. There was this one youth that had pretty much like was comfortable enough to mention about how really their expression of how they see if trash compiles over a native plant or whatnot, how that's suffocating it and killing the plant and ripping it from, you know, from its life source. So and that's kind of like, I don't want to mince their words, but really, again, they had this understanding, though it's different. It's a different culture. It's a different background, but to know the sacredness and the importance and the significance of taking care of the environment, the message was there. And so that was my kind of lived experience involving that, or that notion of just, right, that sharing of culture, that, but having that mutual respect and that mutual understanding of what our work entails or what we do. So. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you for sharing, Natalie. And thank you for sharing, Luis, as well.
Yep.
I think
I had a question. I remember years ago reading some textbooks about the human brain and how from up until about the age of 15, the language center in your brain is really, really active, which is why they say kids can really pick up all kinds of languages easily. So for the ELLs in schools, and I'm hoping you know this, but how long does it take them to become proficient? Have you heard any statistics?
Yeah, I read that to become proficient, at least in like academic language in English, it could take about 5 to 7 years. So it does take time. And even thinking about maybe as adults, maybe you might be trying to learn another language. I don't know for others, but for me personally, I have found it more difficult as, or more challenging as an adult to pick up. I'm trying to learn more Spanish, and so I think if I had learned it while I was younger, it would have been easier to pick up. I don't know. It depends on the individual, but what the experts are saying is that it takes about 5 to 7 years to acquire academic language in English.
And is it usually, and I'm not sure if anyone knows the difference, but is it easier to, or is it tougher to learn the academic English versus the, I've forgotten what to call it, but like the playground English?
Like the social language?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know. Academic language, it can be a lot more complex.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Just because you don't use academic language every single day.
Right, they're not exposed to it on a daily basis, whereas your social conversations are constantly ongoing.
I think you're making too much of the difference between social language and academic language. I mean, academic language is just knowing, various words and jargon associated with science or geography or whatever. Whereas the language that little kids pick up very quickly is just sentence structure and understanding what's been said and how to say things and how to write things. I mean, I think it's well known that between the ages of 1 and 3 and 4, little kids' brains are just like sponges. They absorb things so quickly, especially languages. And I know my wife is Iranian, and her niece and husband have 2 little girls, 5 and 3, and in the same way that Luis was talking about, they speak Farsi at home. So they wanted the little girls to, learn Farsi primarily, but then they were well aware that once they get to school, to kindergarten, then they really need English too. And therefore, they went to, preschool when they were 3, I think, and this preschool was basically conducted in English. So between the parents, who of course were very fluent in English too, and going to this preschool that was conducted in English, and by the time the 5-year-old now, she's fluent in both English and Farsi. So when she starts in kindergarten, she'll be well set to be able to learn appropriately without having all the obstructions and the problems with being an ELL student. So I know, before I started listening to this, I assumed that most of the ELL students, kids in school, would have been from migrant families who have just come to this country. So when, Bonnie, you gave a statistic, I think you said that 85% of the ELL students are native born and were born in this country. I mean, that really kind of surprised me in that, the parents had allowed 4 and 5 years to go by without making sure their kids knew English. So then when Luis described his upbringing, it kind of I mean, I guess it confirms that there are a significant amount of say, you know, in this area, some Spanish people, speaking people who intentionally do not teach their kids English for the first 4 and 5 years. Now, I think that's a big problem. I mean, I understand the issue and the problems, but I think that the parents should be looking towards the well-being of their kids and how they're going to handle school, because as we see, if they don't know English when they go to kindergarten, in school, then they have big problems.
Sorry, I missed a little bit. My internet was cutting in and out. But yes, how having to catch up to their peers who are native English speakers, how there are those challenges, and the importance of addressing those challenges and best supporting these students as we can. These students are coming from families where education is highly valued, where parents want their students to succeed in the classroom, where when they graduate from high school, they are prepared to you know, go possibly to college or enter the workforce. And so it's something that we can all try to do our best into helping these students and making parks more accessible. And so as we get closer to 1 o'clock, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Sarah and to Lay and to our peers over at SAMO and here at Channel Islands. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Thank you for encouraging these students and being supportive to them. And I'll pass it over to Lay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. Thanks everyone for joining us. The only thing I have left to say is to enjoy the rest of your Thursday and tune in till next time.
Like, can I throw in a couple of quick things?
Yeah.
Somebody showed me the app Google Translate, which is a free app, and it works really, really well. If you've never ever tried it, you can speak into your phone, it'll translate it. Either, you know, show you it written or a voice will speak, but there's also a part of it where you can speak. There's a whole choice of different languages, but so you say something in English, the voice will say it in whatever language you've chosen. And if the person you're talking to can then say, you know, talk to the phone in their native language, and it translates it to English. And I just remembered one other funny thing, or sort of funny and sad, and some of you are too young to remember this, and some of the older people probably do. And I can't remember, it happened back in the 90s in California, but there were propositions on the ballots on several occasions, might have been as far back as the 80s, but there were propositions to force every sign in California to be in English. Because there were people that were like, you know, this is America, we should be speaking English and all of that. And I remember thinking, do these idiots realize that if we had to change every sign, I mean, do they understand that like Los Angeles or Los Angeles, that's Spanish. So every sign would have to be changed to the angels. You know, Santa Barbara become Saint Barbara. They didn't seem to have a clue that there were so many signs out here, or names of cities. What Calabasas is, what I think that's Spanish for gourd or pumpkin or something like that. So the cost of changing every sign that was non-English would have bankrupted the state. But they had no clue. I always thought that was silly. They tried several times, and I haven't heard about anything in the last couple of decades, but it kept popping up as propositions that we had to vote on, and luckily they all got voted down, but it was one of the dumbest things I think I'd seen in a while, so I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that would cost a lot if I think about it. Thank you for sharing. Is there any other questions, comments, concerns? I hope to see you guys all on. Carrie, it looks like you have a question.
I just want to mention that something that we can think about along these lines when we're interacting with visitors and the public is to be aware of, there might be people in the group who don't understand what you're saying, but some people don't want to say, okay, you know, so rather than pick those people out and, you know, identify them as not understanding, we can look for cues to maybe slow down our presentation. And you know, it's I had one experience where I had to tell another volunteer that the person they were yelling at was deaf, and so that was kind of a massive non-understanding of the situation. But you know, just to mention that there are some people who won't identify that they're not understanding what you're saying, and they deserve to be served too.
Yeah, that's. I could see that.
Definitely, they might. Yeah, and when we do have those experiences, like we can reflect and think about how we can do better, and kind of research. There's a lot of webinars and videos on YouTube that talk about strategies for serving the public and the ways that we communicate and interact with people.
Yes. All right. Without further ado, the next Zoom session is going to be this Sunday, and it's going to be on the history of Rancho Sierra Vista with Ranger Aaron, Aaron, and I hope to see all of y'all there. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Until next time.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here.